Super Metroid. One of Nintendo's most popular games since it came out back in 1994, it puts the player through an absolute adventure. You get dropped onto the planet Zebus and make your way underground, exploring a vast world of enemies, power-ups, and other oddities. Along the way, you fight several bosses, which test both the player's skill and guts to push onward. Finally, at the end of it all is Mother Brain, an extremely difficult fight that lasts for several minutes, and then a final escape back onto the ship. Many gamers agree that this game is one of Nintendo's masterpieces. Its popularity has stood the test of time, and it's still commonly played today. As a way of honoring its greatness, for more than a decade, a group of speedrunners have been battling each other to beat it as fast as they can. It's been raced at Games Done Quick events, and thousands of hours have been poured into the streaming the game live on Twitch to either get a lower personal best or even lower the world record. In fact, speedrun.com says that there's only 3 games in history that have been run more than Super Metroid. Given the game's legacy, the world record for this game has gone through many changes, whether it be new strategies or better execution. So, today, we're going to look at how the record for Super Metroid has gotten lower over time. One quick thing to note about this game: there are 2 ways of timing it: the in-game timer that you are presented with at the end of the game, and real time, which is a more traditional approach of timing the run from start to finish with a timer. Speedrunners originally used in-game time, since it was accurate and didn't require the hassle of setting a timer. This would eventually change, but I'll explain that later. We're going to start by going all the way back to 2004. Super Metroid speedrunner Smokey was able to get the first Super Metroid run with footage that still exists today, with an in-game time of 38 minutes, or 56 minutes and 22 seconds of real time. Here's how he did it. There are 4 major boss fights in this game before fighting Mother Brain: Kraid, Phantoon, Ridley, and Dragon. You can defeat these bosses in whichever order you want, as long as you defeat them all at some point. Smokey started off his run by heading into Brinstar and fighting Kraid. He was able to do a quick kill on Kraid by shooting him with a super missile when Kraid's mouth was like this, walking it into position, and finishing off the fight quickly. Normally, Kraid's fight could last over a minute, as you'd have to rise all the way up like this from the ground. With this quick kill, it was over in only about 10 seconds. Next, Smokey headed over to the wrecked ship and fought Phantoon. You can only hit Phantoon in his eye, and you can only hit his eye when it is exposed. Phantoon also likes to move around, a lot. Depending on what patterns he gives, this fight can either take a very long time, or be over fairly quickly. This fight ended up taking Smokey around 90 seconds. Then, Smokey went into Meridia to fight Dragon. Dragon is one of the most difficult sections of the game. She can either swoop down or do a mucus cycle. The mucus cycle is where she releases mucus and pretty much just wastes time, and the swoop is where she, well, swoops down. While Smokey didn't have a perfectly clean fight, it was certainly good enough given the time. Finally, the last boss that Smokey fought was Ridley, in Lower Norfair. Ridley can do a lot. He can go invisible, grab Samus, charge at her, go up and down, and of course, swoop across the screen. With a bit of luck and a lot of skillful execution, Smokey is able to defeat Ridley in about 60 seconds. The pattern of going through the bosses in the order Smokey did, Kraid, then Phantoon, then Dragon, and then Ridley, will be used as a template for how to go through the game as fast as possible for years. It became known as the KPDR route, taking the first letter from the name of each of the 4 bosses in the order that they were fought. After going through these 4 bosses, Smokey headed back up to the ship to get his energy back, and then headed over to fight Mother Brain. This fight has 3 forms. The first form is easy enough. You just break open the glass tank with missiles. Then, the second form appears, and the player first sees how big Mother Brain truly is. The best way to deal with this section is to just keep dealing charge shots directly to Mother Brain's face, and dodge her attacks, some of which can kill you in one hit. Smokey did a beautiful job of this in his run. After this phase is a cutscene, and then the third and final form of Mother Brain, where you must deal as much damage to her as quickly as you can. Smokey's method of doing this was to just stand in the lower right corner of the screen and constantly land face shots. It worked well enough, and then all Smokey had to do was escape the exploding planet and get onto the ship. Since he was trying to optimize game time instead of real time, he called his run a 38-minute run. Smokey would eventually lower his time down to 36 minutes, but no footage of his later runs exists today. A couple of years later, in 2006, a runner named Garubo was able to beat Smokey's 36-minute run with a 34-minute run, and was planning to shock the speedrunning community with it. But right as he was about to submit it to the website Speed Demos Archive, where most speedrunners showed off their runs, he got a major surprise. A Japanese runner had already beaten him by 2 minutes, and had gotten a 32. This runner's name? Poto. For anybody who hasn't heard of Poto, he was one of the most legendary speedrunners of all time. He held the world record in Mario games, Mega Man games, several other games and franchises, and many of his records were unbeatable for years. There's not really much that I can say that would be enough to pay tribute to how amazing he really was. The way he got to 32 was mainly just by executing everything like a god. When the run came out, nearly everybody thought that it was fake. The time was just too low for it to be real. Here's an actual quote from the Speed Demos Archive verification team when the run was submitted. Poto level of play is so far beyond anything yet seen on the site that his run was stuck in verification for weeks while the verifiers tried to decide whether or not the video was legitimate. However, no evidence of foul play was ever found. And so today, on behalf of Metroid 2002/Speed Demos Archive, I am proud to present Super Metroid in 32, single segment. People use things like the fact that Poto did arm pumping on a downward slope before Speed Booster to try and prove that the run was fake. Normally, arm pumping like that down a slope would interrupt Samus's running speed, but if these people had actually tested it for themselves, they would have realized that this only applies on certain slopes. The one before the Speed Booster was fine to arm pump on. Probably the best part of this run was at the end. Poto knew that he had a 32 on lock, but also knew that he wasn't going to be fast enough to get a 31. So, just for the hell of it, he decided to save the animals. For anybody unfamiliar with what this is, during the final escape sequence, you can take this path into another room, and shoot this door behind a room filled with animals to save them. All this changes is at the end, you see a tiny pixel float off into the distance, which is supposed to be the animals that escaped. All in all, this wastes about 25 seconds, and is supposed to just be a meme done at Games Done Quick events sometimes. But no, Poto decided that he would create a run so amazing that everyone thought that it was fake, and save the animals just to annoy everyone a little more. After this run came out, a couple of Super Metroid runners, Azor and 072, decided they wanted to try and beat Poto run by getting a 31-minute segmented run. As opposed to Poto single segment run, which is a traditional run completed from start to finish without stopping, a segmented run is a run completed in multiple segments. Runners can grind one segment over and over until they get it how they like, and then move on to the next one. Once they get a great run for each segment, they can piece them together, and it becomes known as a segmented run. People figured that this would probably be the only way to beat Poto 32. But then, Poto just decided to get a 31 single segment run. And once again, people were completely in awe of his skill. One interesting thing that Poto did during this run was decide to focus more on real-time strategies rather than game-time strategies. One such strat was the Murder Beam. This normally creates a vertical beam during Mother Brain 3 that continuously deals damage, but it is much slower for real time, about a minute slower. So he decided to not do it for this run. Amazingly, even though he decided to use real-time strategies, Poto was still able to beat his old run in game time. Since he was going for real time, this run gradually stopped being referred to as a 31 and began to be called its real-time equivalent, a 49.25. For a few years, Poto was completely untouchable. People began to race Super Metroid instead of going for the world record attempts, because they knew that nobody could possibly beat Poto. As a result of those real-time races, the category universally began to be ran in real time, and the game time was pretty much completely thrown out. Eventually, in early 2012, runners finally were able to get sort of close to Poto run. 7 people, Garrison, MSDS, Cassius, DBX, Fusiana, Emodoran, and Hypo, were all trying to get their own sub 50-minute run. Eventually, 2 of these runners rose above the rest and got a sub 50, Fusiana and Emodoran. I was unable to find footage of these runs, but regardless, these 2 runners were close to doing the unthinkable, taking down Poto nearly perfect world record. Unfortunately though, neither of them were able to pull it off. They got close, but Poto run was just too good. It seemed like Poto record would stand for years more. But after Fusiana and Emodoran faded away from the Super Metroid community, another one of those 7 runners was able to pull off a sub 50, Garrison. Garrison streamed his attempts live on Twitch, so he was able to share his excitement with his viewers live as he slowly closed in on Poto record. After a steady series of improvements, Garrison was just a few seconds away from Poto. Finally, on June 6, 2012, it seemed like he was going to beat it. It was going to be close, and it was all coming down to the final escape.
Are you kidding me, dude? TWR.
His timer showed that he had beaten it by 1 second, but in reality, Garrison tried to go down into the ship too early, and stopped the timer then too. He actually went down about a second later, so he was officially tied with Hotaruby. But a week later, he had another chance.
Bad escape.
After having the record for 6 years, Hotaruby had finally been topped. It wasn't by much, and it was slower in the in-game timer, but Garrison had done what so many thought was impossible, taking the record from Hotaruby. Over the next few months, Garrison continued to run Super Metroid. The combination of better movement, better RNG, and slightly improved strategies allowed him to keep pushing his record time down lower. One such strategy was the full halfie, which allows the runner to skip the entire Coliseum. For months, Garrison and MSDS spent countless hours trying to figure out these new strategies, leading to Garrison calling MSDS the unsung hero of Super Metroid. Eventually, Garrison was able to push his time down all the way to 4750. But while Garrison was doing this, another Super Metroid player was quickly improving in the background, Cot Power. Originally a PAL runner, or a runner of the European version of the game, Cot Power became aware of the grind for the NTSC record after it was showcased at ESA 2012. He set out to improve his time. In mid-2012, his PB was 54 minutes. Just a few months later, he improved so much that he was able to take the record from Garrison out of nowhere, on November 3rd, 2012. For a few months after that, Garrison and Cot Power took turns lowering the record. Mostly, they just kept out-executing the other, but Cot Power also found a semi-consistent way to do an extremely difficult trick, the Big Metroid Skip, which allows you to skip getting grabbed by this Metroid at the end of the game, and save a few seconds. While Garrison and Cot Power continued to trade the record back and forth, a new runner, Zoast, proved his skill and took it from them.
Hell yeah. Damn, my heart is beating so hard.
It was pretty clear to most that Zoast was a pretty big force to be reckoned with, and we'll get to Zoast again later. But anyway, these three kept trading the record back and forth, and once the time came down to 45:36 by Cot Power, it seemed as though the run was getting pretty close to the boundaries of what was humanly possible. New strategies were coming out all the time, but nobody could have expected what was coming next. On July 26, 2013, Super Metroid fans woke up to find that the record had changed once again. Only this time, it wasn't Zoast, Garrison, or Cot Power. It was by a speedrunner who didn't even stream on Twitch, Behemoth. This run was done thanks to a number of new strategies that he had figured out with the help of other runners in secret in a private thread. Some of these strategies included climbing up the red tower super quickly, similar to how the tool-assisted run did it, and defeating the plasma pirates with a super bomb. This method of grinding strategies and getting the record offline became known as Behemothing, so one could say that Zoast got Behemoth with this run. Zoast got back to grinding, and using these strategies, he's able to get the record back from Behemoth a couple of weeks later. The chat was pretty excited, including this runner named Oats and Goats. Remember that name. At this point, the new strategies allowed for the time to come all the way down to a 44. Zoast was the first one to get it, although runners Ivan and Krauser also were trying to get the record. These three runners and Garrison ended up racing the game at AGDQ 2014, and what has gone down as one of the greatest speedrunning races of all time.
Well, and I
After that AGDQ, it was all Zoast. He wanted to push the game as far as he could. The in-game timer was at a 29 still for all of his runs, and you wondered if maybe he could get it down to a 28. He pushed it more and more, and to his surprise, in August of 2014, he got the 28.
Oh shit! Holy shit, dude!
The time of that run in real time was a 44:08. It seemed like that might be a fitting ending to the game's speedrun. The game had started by being timed by in-game time, and while it had switched to real time, Zoast had pushed the game time down as far as it seemed it could go in the process. But then Zoast got Behemoth again. For the past 10 years, or maybe even longer, runners have been following the same route that Smokey did at the beginning of the video. Kraid first, then Fantoon, then Dragon, and finally Ridley. In early 2014, Behemoth began to search maybe there was a faster route through the game. He looked with Reeve, Forensic, and even Smokey, who was one of the first runners to use the KPDR route. And after a few months of searching, and a few more months of practicing and working out quirks, Behemoth had himself a new route to use. Fantoon first, then Ridley, then Kraid, and finally Dragon. This route ended up having a huge potential to save time. If executed correctly, and given great RNG, it could save up to 100 seconds of real time, although it would lose 2 minutes of game time, but nobody really cared about game time. While the minute and 40 seconds of game seemed fantastic, the only problem is that it's harder. A lot harder. And the luck required with the boss's patterns to get all 100 seconds is pretty unlikely. Still, that didn't stop Behemoth from behemothing Zoast once again, and taking his record by 20 seconds with this new route just 5 days after Zoast got the 44:08. The reaction to this new route being discovered was overwhelmingly positive from almost the entire Super Metroid community. The potential to lower the record was great, so Zoast and Behemoth got to work, slowly executing the route better and better, and getting better RNG.
We're in there. Hell yeah. Not bad, not bad. Hell yeah. No steam. Still got it. Oh, God, what a nail biter, man. Fuck.
By mid-2015, it was pretty clear that Zoast was just a complete god at Super Metroid. He pushed it more and more, simply by executing the route better, getting better RNG, and by being Zoast. The month of October 2015 was pretty solid for Super Metroid. Zoast got a new record of 42:32 on October 10th. 8 days later, he took 2 seconds off of it. The next day, he took another 2 seconds off. 3 days later, another 3 seconds came off. And finally, 4 days later, on October 26th, he took 13 more seconds off.
What we got? Holy! Woo! 42:13. Whoa! That's a 28, my friends.
He improved the Super Metroid record 5 times in 1 month, and took half a minute off of the record in process. Zoast seemed to be the undisputed champion of Super Metroid speedrunning. But do you guys remember that guy Oats and Goats I was talking about?
Yes! Woo! Yes! Yes! Woo! Yeah, dude, we got it! Yeah. Dude, yes! Yes! We fucking got it!
After having steadily improved his own personal best for months, Oats and Goats was able to take the world record from the legendary Zoast by a few seconds. The time was down to a low 42, so naturally, as all speedrunners would do, everyone was anticipating the 41-minute time. Zoast and Oats both wanted it, so they both started grinding it. Zoast wasn't streaming attempts quite as often, but Oats was streaming 41 attempts nearly every day. Ultimately though, Zoast was the first one to find success. He started by tying Oats 42-10, then lowered the record by 5 seconds a few months later. Finally, in September 2016, he did it. He got a 41.58 offline and then replayed it on his stream. But Oats wasn't about to give up. He knew that he had the skill to get the record back, so he kept pushing forward, even though it was incredibly frustrating sometimes. And then, on October 18th, 2016, everything was coming together. He cleared boss after boss, difficult section after difficult section, and then it was on to the escape.
Not looking. Not looking. That's it, baby! That's it! Yeah! Woohoo! Oh, yeah! That's it!
And as of February 2017, that's where the world record stands. Super Metroid has been on the forefront of the speedrunning community ever since speedruns were even a thing. It's been one of the most coveted records, and every time the record has changed hands, it's brought in a wave of attention to the game and to the runners. This game requires so much, an insane amount of skill, a ton of RNG, and a seemingly endless amount of patience and persistence. While the record keeps getting so optimized, who knows what new strategies will be discovered, or if Behemoth will do his thing again and completely revolutionize the game. Although, he does stream now, so it's unlikely that he would find it in secret. This game has a long and treasured past, and it's sure to have a thrilling future as well. Thanks for watching everyone, I'll see you next time.